I want to get right to our next guest, who's Trevor Matich, our analyst here, of all things having to do with the Redskins. Let's start out, Trevor, if I could, with this soundbite.
Today was one of our poor games. Some big plays on special teams. I know they got great returners, but they made us look pretty poor today. Field position was off the charts.
You know, they looked bad, Trevor. But there's a lot swirling around this loss that has nothing to do with the X's and O's, and a lot of sort of palace intrigue regarding Mike Shanahan and Dan Snyder and the status of their relationship. Where is that? And do you believe these rumors, this report that came out from ESPN, that last January Shanahan was ready to walk out, had cleaned out his office, ready to go, because he felt that Snyder had too close of a relationship with RG3 and was undermining his coaching ability?
Well, I don't buy the idea that he actually cleaned out his locker. Whether or not he was upset about the other things is an open question. I kind of believe that he was. But
let me stop you there for a minute, because he was asked to comment about this. Now, normally, if a report is dead wrong, you say, I'm sorry, that's not true, but I'm really not going to go into it any further.
Right.
He didn't do that. He just refused to talk about it, period.
That's the problem. There were a number of questions that would have been easy for him to just say that it's not an issue, it's not a problem, that's not true, let's move on. That's all he had to say, and I understand that he wants to keep things focused on football right now because they've got to play a game next week. But when it comes down to it, that was one of the questions that would have been easy to say, no, that's not true, now let's move on. Instead, what he said was, referring to that report that he had cleaned out his locker in anticipation of quitting last year over what the report claimed were Shanahan's reservations over RG3's relationship with the owner, Dan Snyder. Instead of shooting that down, what he said was, in reference to that, I don't want to talk about something that happened last year. There's a more appropriate time to talk about that. Now, wait a minute. Something that happened last year? That's almost an acknowledgement that it came out. And
yeah.
To me, the truth of what happened there is less important than the fact that a reputable reporter at ESPN wrote it. He didn't just make it up. That means somebody.
It didn't come out of thin air. Okay,
and that is what the problem is.
Dan, give me just a second, because I want to explore this with Trevor. Okay, so look, it didn't come out of thin air. It came from somewhere. If it came from the Shanahans, then a lot of people would say, well, the Shanahans are trying to change the narrative that the miserable season is their fault. And incidentally, it comes at a time when the Houston Texans are looking for a coach, and Kyle Shanahan has had a past relationship with the Houston Texans. I mean, I would imagine that if this is coming from anywhere, it's got to be coming from the Shanahans.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It appears that there's palace intrigue going on. It appears that there are leaks that are designed to make the coach look less bad in this whole scenario and throw the blame over to the quarterback and the owner. And that, I think, is what the problem is. What the truth is of whether or not he cleared out his locker, or his office, whether or not he wanted to quit last year over what the article claims is a relationship between RG3 and the owner that is too close. All those things are open to speculation in terms of the facts. But what is an absolute fact is that somebody did go to the media with this, and it's unattributed to Shanahan, so we don't know if it was him. But the fact that it came out is where the rift is right now between the coach and the owner.
Well, the fact that it came out and he didn't deny it.
Right. And Trevor, what kind of stock do you put into this preferential treatment report? And if I can just add on to that, you know, in your experience in the NFL, have you seen this before, and does it shake up team chemistry for all the wrong reasons?
Team chemistry. The thing is, I believe that.
Really? I mean, without naming names, does it really? I mean, if you got a guy like Peyton Manning, who's a real, stratospheric superstar and has some special relationship, do people kind of, it rubs them the wrong way?
You know, it depends on the scenario. I mean, you've got, Tom Brady up at New England and Bob Kraft, the owner there, that have a relationship, and that's fine. But Brady's won Super Bowls, so has Peyton Manning. And you've got owners that have a reputation and a track record of backing the coach and never doing anything to undermine the coach. What you've got with Dan Snyder is an owner who in 14 years has had 7 head coaches, for goodness sake, and he has been very close to players from the very beginning in a way that does undermine the coach's authority in the locker room. Now, I believe that Dan Snyder wants to win. I believe he bought this team because he wants to be seen as one of the greats. I think that eventually he'll get there because he's willing to invest money. He is driven to win. He's willing to make changes, and he's made a bunch of changes under Shanahan to try to get to that point. But this one thing of having his door open to star players means that in the locker room there are players that'll think that their final deciding person over their career is not the coach anymore. It's now the owner. And whether or not the relationship with the owner means that that's the case, that's the perception of the other players, and that's what undermines the chemistry.
There's so much going on with this. Could I beg your indulgence? Will you stick around through the commercial break? Because I got two more questions I got to ask.
Sure.
All right, hang on. We're going to take a commercial break. It's 6:43, time for a commercial. Still on the line, Trevor Matich, our Redskins analyst. Okay, I got like 5 or 6 quick questions. First of all, Shanahan was asked, will RG3 start? Now, they sat him down toward the end of the game. I think a lot of people thought probably not a bad decision. But he was asked, will he start next week? And Shanahan would make no comment. RG3, when asked the same question, says, not an issue. Wow. Now, that was interesting to me.
So, again, that sounds like palace intrigue.
It does.
Because
it's
all
like
Shanahan had to say was what we already know, which is RG3 is the starting quarterback of this team now and going forward.
But he didn't say that.
Play.
He didn't say that.
That's all he had to say. And he's been around the league long enough to know that not answering that question would create a firestorm in the media, and yet he allowed it to hang out there.
Well, so what do you read into that?
I read into that he's trying to cover his own shortcomings in this debacle of a season. He's trying to blame the quarterback. He's trying to blame the owner. And the truth of it is, I believe there's plenty of blame to go around. But when you have a head coach that allows the appearance that he is behind reports like this, or at least that he condoned reports like this, the appearance of that, and doesn't shoot them down immediately, or at least attempt to, then you've got greater problems, because guess who notices that? The players.
Yes, they do.
That.
Well, do you think they gave up?
They gave up on the idea of doing the right things. In other words, they played hard. Yeah. You can't find anybody loafing, but you found a lot of people playing poorly, poor execution, poor technique, especially on special teams. You had guys that were running hard, but they started to freelance and do things on their own instead of doing the right things that you would expect of a cohesive team.
And one of the things, Trevor, that always bothered me is, listen, I don't have nearly 1/10 the talent to compete in the NFL, but these guys are paid a lot of money, and the fans who showed up, braved the weather to go out there. They're expecting 100% effort. And I don't want to be melodramatic about it, but I mean, there's nothing worse, and it's like there's no crying in baseball. Remember the old Tom Hanks thing? Get on the field and play the game. And I know it's special teams throwing your body like a missile ain't the greatest thing out there, but it didn't look to me like.
I mean, if you're at the end of your season and you're not going anywhere and you're on special teams, why do you put your body at risk at this point?
Because you're paid to. I mean, right? I mean, Trevor, is it when you're in the locker room, isn't that one of those things you just don't do?
Well, sure, and there's all those things. And Niles Paul, one of the core special teams guys, said that there weren't enough guys on special teams that wanted to be there. Now, that's an eye-opener as well.
Wow.
But see, you throw into be there, meaning didn't want to play on special teams. But when it comes down to it, though, you throw that performance and then out there, and then you combine it with the way the press conference went. And that's why this is such a firestorm. Because, players are supposed to go out there and give it their all. They're not supposed to point fingers. But what the players in the locker room cannot help but think is that the head coach is the one that's pointing fingers. And here's why. We don't know where the ESPN report that he wanted to quit last year came from. Right now there's no information on that. But we know the report is there. And the players know that the head coach did not shoot it down. All he said was, it's not the time to talk about something that happened last year.
All right, so we're way over, but I got to just quick. Is Shanahan the coach at 3:00 this afternoon?
I'd be surprised. I think right now he has tweaked the nose of the owner. He hasn't just had disagreements with him. He has an owner here who has built the practice bubble, allowed him to hire his son, which he didn't want to do originally, moved training camp to Richmond, which Shanahan wanted him to do, and all of a sudden there's public information out there that appears to be coming from the coach's camp that embarrasses the owner. Now that is an unforgivable thing, and especially when you don't then at least deny that it was you.
All right.
Wow.
That's pretty impressive. Well, listen, thank you very much, Trevor. Always greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Trevor.